Freedom Radio Hour. Live on Capital Radio 91.6 FM.
All right, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Freedom Radio Hour. I'm your host, DJ Adam Cruz, and I have my fantastic co-host right here,
Eddie Nicholas. What up, beautiful people? We are so glad that you came to join us here at 91.6 FM, the Heartbeat of Sudan. Boom, 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 boom. So I guess we're going to jump right into the day.
We are. There is so much to cover. But first, we got to let our listeners and our viewers know, yes, that there's the Freedom Radio Hour is here, not only bringing you fantastic music, but we're here to be your number one source for music, business, news, and trends from around the globe. Oh man, I don't even know where to start, but we're going to just jump right in. So the first, I think this is going to be about updating on some things you might have been joining us about before. So the first thing I want to talk about is what's happened with the exclusive model. Quick history. You know, on streaming services, like if you sign up for a Spotify or Apple or Tidal, up until very recently, they were telling you, well, your favorite artist is who?
Well, I like so many, but at the moment, we'll go with Shirley Bassey.
Yes. Okay. So let's say they say, okay, Eddie, we have Shirley Bassey signed only to Apple Music. If you want to ever hear any of Shirley Bassey's projects or albums, you can only sign up at Apple Music. And you, in turn, sign up for that Apple Music. So now you're getting your life because your favorite artist is on that service. Well, what started to happen was you, as Eddie, as the fan, started to notice that Shirley Bassey products and albums were starting to be available on Tidal and on Pandora and these other services. So you, very rightfully so, are upset, presumably, because you're spending your $10, your $15, $20 a month to get exclusive material. Correct. So the exclusive material was the driving force for getting subscribers to sign up to the Tidal service, to Apple or what have you. So you being a Shirley Bassey fan, you're quite upset to learn that Shirley's material is available on these other services and not just the one that you signed up for. Why would that upset you? Well, maybe you like a lot of artists and not just Shirley Bassey, and the other artists might be on some other services exclusively as well. So now, what are you going to do? Sign up for multiple services? No. So what ended up happening is these record labels noticed that there is the buzziest period of time and they're getting reduced listening that's happening during this time. Let me give you an analogy. The buzziest period of time for music releases is like when you're shot out of a cannon. When you initially get shot out, right? The trajectory is upward, and there's a force that brings you all the way up to its highest point, and then gravity kicks in, and it starts to go down, right? So what they're talking about here is the buzziest period of the time is the time that you first get shot out from that cannon and to that upper top point. All that whole period is considered for record label execs the buzziest period of time. And what they notice is doing these exclusive models, they started to get reduced listening and then an increased frustration in consumers, like in this scenario, Eddie, who were feeling frustrated that artists weren't being available through their service, or their favorite artist was being available on other services. So in other words, exclusivity kind of went down the tubes because it was very frustrating for people that were paying into the service. And you had this problem where the reduced listening happened. So they had to do something. So what do you think they did?
You know, I'm trying to just, first of all, get over what that mouthful you just said. Because again, when you talk about exclusivity, yes.
Oh,
thank you.
Yes.
Exclusivity. See, I done made a new word. You find that nothing is ever singly where you can get it.
No.
So therefore, me being a Shirley Bassey fan, why in the world would I want to sign up for a service that claims that they can give me stuff singly when the internet allows you to search for whatever and anything that you want for free?
Yes. And so that brings me to the next part of this, which is one problem is, yes, your biggest competition when you're dealing with streaming services isn't service to service. Like you would think in practice, my biggest competition would be if I'm Apple or Tidal, the other services. No, the biggest competition is free. Because how do you get the consumer who's been accessing the material for free on, say, YouTube, how do you convince them that it's now worthwhile to pay? And the reality is that if you're into the free, you're not going to buy into the service. That's why YouTube has ad-supported platforms, so that while you listen for free, you're going to have to click through a commercial or two, so that it pays for some of that material, even though we get paid even less by the free tiers. At least we're getting something through the ad supports, right? So back to this exclusivity problem. What they did to try to combat it, because the labels are not trying to lose money.
Of course not. They're trying to make.
Exactly. The streaming services have started to bring in $2 billion a year, $15 billion globally. So $2 billion for the U.S., $15 billion globally. That's a big business.
But where's that money going?
Well, you know where it's going. It's going to these big conglomerates. That's no big secret. All the Spotify's, Apples, they're making a killing. And what's happened is that ASCAP and BMI, Performance Rights Society, when you write a song, you signed up for these services that help with your performance rights. So what happens is these companies are also reporting record revenues, but it doesn't mean that they too haven't had their share of problems. We'll break down what the streaming services are doing to deal with the fact that exclusivity is out the window to try to get more subscribers to come in. And then we'll also break down how ASCAP and BMI are related to all this when we come back. Where?
91.6 FM, the heartbeat of Sudan.
Freedom Radio Hour. Live on Capital Radio 91.6 FM.
What up, beautiful people, and welcome back to 91.6 FM. I'm one of your hosts, Eddie Nicholas, and I'm so glad that you have come here to join me and my co-partner sitting over here by me,
Mr. Adam Cruz. And you're deep in the zone right here on the Freedom Radio Hour. We're your number one source for music, business news, and trends from around the globe. We're live on Capital Radio 91.6 FM and on the web at dwopmusicradio.com. Before we broke, we were talking about all the mayhem that started to happen around exclusive deals and the streaming services. Who are we talking about? Spotify, Apple Music, Tidal, Pandora, Amazon, and their new Echo service. They have all these streaming services that are popping up because in the US, they have brought in $2 billion and globally $15 billion. So this is a business that's not planning to go anywhere anytime soon. So
unless they dry up the stream, because river streams dry up, oceans dry up. You never know when streaming is going to dry up. So you got to be attentive. You got to be assertive. You got to be aware. I'm so sorry. I just had to.
No, but that
streams.
Yes, but that leads me right to our next topic here. I mean, we're going to go back because I think it's so related that we can kind of jump topics and it still relates. So, and on the strength of the possibility of things drying up, ASCAP and BMI have reported record revenues, but they for the last 2 years, since 2014, have been fighting the Department of Justice off these antitrust consent decrees. That's a fancy way of saying, from the government standpoint, they're allowing ASCAP and BMI to run as essentially monopolies because there are not very many PROs now. Now we have CSAC to add to the fold, but initially it was only ASCAP and BMI. So they were essentially allowed to operate as monopolies, but restraints were placed on them to protect consumers from monopoly pricing. What does that mean? That means that you could be the only two companies initially, but you can't raise the price as much as you want. So we put protections on consumers that try to get licenses from you, ASCAP and BMI, and you can't raise the price but so much. Okay, so that protection, that's called an antitrust consent decree, and that's been in place for a while. Well, since 2014, these two organizations, ASCAP and BMI, have been fighting the Department of Justice over that. What do they want to do? They want to loosen the antitrust consent decree so that they're allowed to go in and ask for more money from the businesses that want to license music from them. Who are the businesses? Mostly restaurants, retail stores, people with jukeboxes, things like that. They have to secure licenses for the music at their establishment. So they hit up an ASCAP or BMI, and through the consent decree, they're allowed to pay only but a certain amount. But what ASCAP and BMI want to do is loosen that up so that they can ask for more money. The other thing they're proposing for the Department of Justice, this is again back in 2014, they were proposing that they apply what's called fractional licensing. You see, most songs are owned by multiple people, not just one person. Like even in Eddie and I's situation, we often write together. So we're both credited as writers for a particular song, for example. But this doesn't include the person who composed the music. They too are included. So now you can have several owners of a song. So fractional licenses demands that these restaurants and retail stores and other establishments like them secure licensings from all the owners of the song. So what it does is essentially puts the onus on these restaurants and retail stores to secure the same licensing deal multiple times over. And there's a big problem with that. What's the big problem? Well, it leaves a big gaping hole of possibility for infringement, because who can keep up with the practice of that? See, in theory, it seems like, yeah, that makes sense. Of course, you got to get the rights for every owner. But in practice, that's why ASCAP and BMI are there, to help facilitate and to make easy a normally complicated process. But because ASCAP and BMI are on the hunt for more money, they, despite reporting record revenues, they want more money. So they're trying to fight the Department of Justice to make that happen.
But what more money for who?
But for these businesses,
I know they want money from the business, but who is that money going to? I hear nothing about. We know we're trying to fight for more money for the artists, so that we can bring the fractional 0.44 nothing percent up. You hear all this fighting for money. You're making $2 billion, but why are people who are registered with these organizations, including myself, not getting anything?
Because it's simple.
Because in other words, if we're part of it, we're the stockholders.
Yes.
We are the stockholders. So as we're being the stockholders, it should be regardless of if any of our material is being sold at all, because we are stockholders in that. We should still be able to reap from that $2 billion.
Well, you know that ASCAP and BMI are going to do nothing but send press releases that intimate the very thing that you're saying. What about the artists? They're going to say, well, us fighting for more money means more money in your artist's pocket. But you and I also side-eye that, because we know the reality is that oftentimes, we don't want to target, but oftentimes these companies that want to fight for more of the dollars, for them to put it in their pocket.
In corporate's pocket.
Right.
In corporate's pocket.
So in ASCAP and BMI's case, they're supposed to be our agent here. So we have to be always careful now, in light of the digital age and streaming age of music, what the politicization occurs when this happens.
The politics.
Yes. The politics indeed. But going back to Spotify and that, remember I'm telling you earlier that the exclusive model died away because they figured that when the record first comes out, it reduces listening and it frustrates consumers if they can't get the artist's new album on a certain streaming service over another. It's very frustrating. So they're trying to deal with that. So how do you suppose they're getting more subscribers if exclusivity is out the window? Well, they want to say, if it's you, Eddie, they don't just want exclusivity anymore, because they realize that's not really going to work. They do want you and your time, though. They want you to curate content. What does that mean? They want you to develop your own channel, an Eddie Nicholas channel. They want an Eddie Nicholas radio show. They want Eddie Nicholas curated art projects, collaborative efforts. You're part of the marketing. You are supplying playlists on a regular basis. They want all of that from you, because they figure, okay, so if you're into Shirley Bassey, not only you can get the music, but you can get that anywhere now. I'm pretending to be a streaming service. But not only can you get Eddie's material on, say, Spotify, but now Eddie's going to give you his channel and radio show and art project and channel, all this stuff. Is that worthwhile to you as a consumer wanting to, say, follow Shirley Bassey? Would you?
No, when I can in effect start my own webpage and bring all of that content directly to me.
I'm talking about, we're going back with the scenario that you are, Shirley Bassey's your favorite artist. You purchased Apple Music because she was only available on Apple, but now because that's dead, and you've noticed that she's available everywhere, not just Apple Music, that now they're saying Shirley's going to give you a radio show, channels, playlists, etc. Is that enticing?
No, because I still would have.
Me either. Because I thought I was the only one. It's not enticing at all.
Because
Why?
I still would have gone to Google search, typed in my artist's name, all of the information and everything that Shirley Bassey has ever done will pop up.
That's
and
right.
I will go on about my merry way and compile it as I see fit.
Let's take another break. When we come back, we're going to break down more of this music business news. Where?
91.6 FM, freedomradio.com, y'all.
Freedom Radio Hour.
Freedom Radio Hour
And we're back live on Capital Radio 91.6 FM, the Heartbeat of Sudan, and on the web at dwildmusicradio.com. You're deep in the zone right here on the Freedom Radio Hour. We're your number one source for music, business news, and trends from around the globe. You made a fascinating point before we broke, Eddie. This is my co-host right here, Eddie Nicholas, and we're talking music business news, but in particular, these streaming services that used to rely on exclusivity deals, little exclusive deals to try to entice you to sign up to their service. Now, they realized that they needed to stop that, in essence, because there wasn't enough money that they could make during during the buzz period. That's the buzziest time when the record first comes out, and there's a little, it's like the equivalent, I call it sometimes, of throwing paint at the wall. When you first hit, there's impact, and then it slides down. So they're talking about the initial impact part. They need to increase listens, which means increasing profit. So they had to figure it out. So what they've done now is say, okay, since we're not going to do exclusive deals as much, we'll do special channels of the artist, special radio shows, special content, special projects. And you and I side-eyed it because the reality is it's available in the wide space of the internet, whether you pay for it or it's free. It's only a matter of time where you could find your favorite artists, not just on these services, but all over the place. So the idea of containing it in one service over another is just not working out. Why? Because it's like a colander. If you're going to put material in a colander, it's things are going to seep through.
Exactly.
It's just,
and and I did want to say one thing. I do know that both ASCAP and BMI have made it possible for artists like ourselves that are members of to do content pages on their sites. Like you can go to ASCAP, or BMI, and you, as a member, you can load up your performance material. You can load up your content material, your records where you're selling them at. So they have made outlets for you as the individual artist to be able to draw attention to yourself. Just wanted to say that.
So talking about ASCAP and BMI, they're related to the streaming services story that we were covering, because the two stories are the same in that each are trying to figure out how to make more and more money as the years go on. You see, for streaming services, they're hoping that if in Eddie's case, since he loves Shirley Bassey, if they have Shirley Bassey channel on her radio show, that Eddie would sign up for a service over another. We don't agree, but that's what they're hoping.
And pay $10.
Yes, a month, not just one time. Not gonna happen. Okay. But on the other side, ASCAP and BMI, they too are trying to figure out how they can get more money out of the businesses that secure licenses for the music that they represent. What businesses? We're talking retail stores, restaurants, bars that have music playing that they have to secure licenses for. So they'll hit up an ASCAP or BMI. And up until now, they had a consent decree that limited the amount of money that ASCAP and BMI could ask for, so that it sort of levels the playing field and makes it possible for businesses to continue thriving. Were you
and it reminds, when you were talking about that, it reminds me of the days when you had to account for records, when you had the jukeboxes.
Yes.
You could go in and you could do the count of how many sold, how many were played, and all of this type of stuff.
Time.
It's a very simpler time.
Yeah.
So
So what ended up happening to end on what we're talking about regarding their particular case, ASCAP and BMI for the last 2 years have been fighting the Department of Justice for two things. One, they wanted to loosen the antitrust consent decree so that they could ask for more money. The second thing they wanted to do is they wanted the Department of Justice to institute fractional licensing. You see, right now, if you go to ASCAP, you get a license for the song. But what ASCAP and BMI would rather you do is go to each owner of the song and secure a license for each party. You see the difference? Let me say that again. Right now, if I'm a restaurant and I need to secure licenses for music so I can play it in my establishment, I sign up with an ASCAP or a BMI right now. And I pay whatever they're asking me to pay for unlimited access to their repertoire, their catalog, if you will. But what ASCAP and BMI wants you to do is not just hit us up. If I'm ASCAP, let's say, you also have to go to the owners of each of these songs to secure licenses from them. Fractional licensing is what it's called. And so what happened was in 2014, this is the interesting story here. Remember we talked about why aren't these outfits all on the same side of the table fighting the same fight in unity? That's because oftentimes one organization is cozier with the legal teams than the others.
Lobbying.
So in the case of BMI, when came out, and see, they did this starting in 2014, fighting the Department of Justice. In 2016, over the summer, the Department of Justice did an exhaustive review, and they came back to say, we have to keep those protections on there because we know that you're about to go and try to hike these prices up, which they're going to hustle these businesses for more money, and they won't be able to run. It'll essentially halt this market because they'll be tied up in trying to secure licenses from multiple people for whatever the money is.
Now, at one time, was there ever like a blanket license that these owners with these big restaurants would buy into? I do know there's also a service that they could buy into where the music is kind of piped in like a.
There's a lot of options now, but what you're talking about is on radio right now. If you're a radio, you pay a blanket license to have your song on radio through Congress. Congress made it possible so that you didn't have to go to each individual person to secure it. It allowed you to be able to play songs on the radio, right? So that's one thing. But we're talking about performance royalties. So ASCAP and BMI knows that the businesses have to secure a license through them to make that happen, and they want to make more money. So it's hard for them because the Department of Justice came back to say we have to keep the protections on because we know you guys will wild out with the prices. And number two, your fractional license proposal is antithetical in opposition to the consent decree. So you can't do it because you can't have a consent decree and there's fractional licensing. So no, ASCAP nor BMI, you can't. So
and it sounds like it takes the onus off of ASCAP and BMI. You know, if you want my music, boom, you're going to pay us. We're going to get our money, but then you have to go after the other people yourself.
Right, because don't forget that they still have to admin this. That means they have to be the person to deal with the paperwork and the back and forth, so they're still going to get their coin. Anyhow, so the end of the story is this. So when they got the loss came out, and they said, oh man, BMI and ASCAP lost against the Department of Justice, they decided to go to their allies. BMI went to their allies in Capitol Hill, and ASCAP went to their allies in the Southern Court. And these two places is where these courts had jurisdiction over that consent decree. So they went fighting, but because BMI had a judge that was friendlier to BMI than ASCAP's judge was friendlier to ASCAP, guess what happened? BMI's judge said, I'm going to overturn the Department of Justice decision, and you guys can work on your fractional licensing. Why not? But ASCAP's judge said, nope, you can't. What does that mean for us? That puts us in limbo because at the very least, we know that these organizations are not at the same side of the table, fighting the same fight together. See, Eddie and I, for a long time, used to think that these outfits like ASCAP, PMI, and CSAC were at the very least fighting in unison over the same things.
For artist protection and residuals and all that.
But what we're not accounting for is the fact that some orgs are cozier than others. They're more in bed with the politicians and the folks that are on the legal teams to make it work for them. So this is why they're not on the same side of the table, because BMI knows that ASCAP is not as cozy. They're like, you better go over there with your not cozy self. I'll go and win my cases while you figure it out for yourself, because don't forget that these are competitors. Think about it. Even though they're monopolies and they're allowed to run, it's no mistake that they're not on the same side around these issues. It's very important to understand the power that these companies have over one another in the long term. That's all the time we have for today. But I think we're going to talk more about what's happening with the royalty system and how it's admin, especially when we're talking more about the all-in-one now, all these outfits that are coming out where you could manage your royalties all in one place. You didn't have to mess with all these companies. We'll see what the future of this is going to be looking like. Anyway, thank you so much for tuning in. Definitely tune in to EddieNicholas.com for his one-time single, as well as You Left Me, the 2016 remixes. Check out DJAdamCruz.com for my Freedom LP, and also just let us know what you think. Go visit freedomradiohour.com and post under all of the articles that we post, because we love to hear from you and we like to see what you think about all of this. Thank you so much for tuning in. Have a great weekend and a great week ahead. We'll see you next time.
Peace out. 91.6 FM, the Heartbeat of Sudan.